Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues, and Bible theology, philosophy, and politics, and whatever else I come up with in relationship to those issues. Today is more about responding to several comments I've had over the last few days about personal experience in relationship to as an argument for God or validation of God or whatever. In truth, the argument for personal experience is probably one of the weakest arguments for the existence of God because of a lot of reasons. But I want to first all start out saying that a lot of these arguments that I'm going to use today I actually heard way back in Bible college by my apologetics professor, who started the class by pointing out how personal experience didn't prove the existence of God or prove anything of the sort. This was my apologetics professor. Now, those same arguments I have used many, many times before as a Christian and as a non-Christian. But I want to double check myself, so I went to a video that I remembered about that thing from Rationality Rules, and so I'll link that video up in the description where he goes through logically point by point how personal experience doesn't really prove anything, let alone spiritual experiences. Personal experience is just that. The problem with it is personal. Now, what is this? Most of these arguments for the existence of God or existence of a spiritual reality based on experience don't really take the form of an argument. The person just relates the experience and then says that's why they believe X is true. If I were to steel man this argument, and Rationality Rules does this exact same thing in his video where he talks about steel manning this argument, and I concur with him, this is the best steel-manned argument of the argument from personal experience that I can possibly give you. Number one, that the account of my personal experience is infallible. That's what you're saying. My interpretation of my personal experience is also infallible. I have personally had experience X, whatever that experience is. Therefore, X is true. That is the steel-manned version of any argument from personal experience. In relationship to spiritual claims, it gets even worse because, well, a lot of people take their spiritual encounters very, very personally. And because of that, they also, whenever you start attacking their argument from personal experience, what you end up with is them thinking that you're accusing them of lying. I'm not accusing anybody of lying. What I am saying is I don't believe your claim that your interpretation of your personal experience is infallible, that there is other options and other things that could be true. Now, more officially and more along the lines of logical fallacies, the first one is often these claims contradict reality. Depending on what claims you make, it just doesn't really line up with what we know to be true, that we have tested, we've experienced. It doesn't line up with any of the theories, hypotheses, facts, evidence, or anything that we have of how reality really works. It doesn't line up with any of it. And so in order to make some of these claims, you have to really contradict the realities of life. And that's just not a good thing. Often these experiences, the second thing is often these experiences also are mutually exclusive. In some of the comments that I've done, one version of this is somebody will claim one version of the afterlife and then one will claim the B version of the afterlife, and the two can't both be true. Particularly, say, the claim of reincarnation versus the reincarnation of heaven and hell. Those are two very different claims about what the afterlife is about, and they contradict each other. They both can't be true. And a lot of these personal experiences, when you hear different people give them, that really lines up. in my own case, in the last couple of days, I've seen this argument take this form when I pointed out what I asked the question, how do you differentiate then that your personal experience is different from any of these other personal experiences where they say that it affirms their religion? One example I could give is a lot of Pentecostals believe that if you speak in tongues, that's proof of evidence of being baptized in the Holy Spirit. Just as an aside, I, as an atheist, can speak in tongues, so I'm not really sure if that proves that anymore. But on the other hand, the other person, let's say a Hindu, and Hindus have been noted to speak in tongues too, says that that's proof of their Hinduism. The response I've gotten from many people over the years goes something like this, and Hindus have been noted to speak in tongues too, says that that's proof of their Hinduism. The response I've gotten from many people over the years goes something like this. Well, yeah, but that's their experience and they're being deceived by demons and false gods. How do you know that? See, this is where we go back to you are interpreting yours as infallible. How do you know that perhaps they're the ones not hearing? And how do you know that? You can't know that. You can't possibly know that. The other thing is, everything I've heard the thing about personal experiences is they are completely anecdotal. It's the anecdotal fallacy. Yes, that exists. You can't argue from experiences because experiences aren't testable, repeatable, or even falsifiable. The best arguments are falsifiable because then if you make the argument and also tell how your argument can be falsified, then you can also argue the point that, okay, if it's falsifiable and then I test it and all the criteria that I say would falsify my claim, I test for those and I don't find any falsification, then that actually makes my argument stronger. And that's something that people need to consider when they talk about this, because that is actually true. The other thing is every single experience I have ever heard has some sort of appeal to emotion, some sort of on the edge seat of this is my story, this is what I was going through, and this is how it was resolved, and therefore my experience is true. Sorry, appeals to emotion don't mean anything. Feelings are not right or wrong. They can't be verified or disproven. You can say that you're experiencing an emotion, and I might accept that that might be true, but it doesn't prove anything. The other thing is, and I agree with rationality rules on this one, it's an argument from authority. You're the only one that had that experience, and so you're arguing from your authority and your belief in the infallibility of your interpretation of your experience, that you are the authority on that experience. That's an argument from authority, which, by the way, some of you have used the Bible in your arguments. I want to let you know something. I'm an atheist. I don't believe the Bible. I have a degree in biblical studies and a degree in theological studies, and all of them point to me that the Bible is just a book. Okay, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but I don't care what one group interprets one passage or another group's another passage. I know that there are multiple interpretations of the same passage. Once again, how do you know your interpretation of that passage is the correct one? Are you claiming infallibility of interpretation? Because that's what it sounds like. You would be better to couch your language into something like, it's the most probable one to me based on what I see. But when you come on, it comes off as kind of arrogant when you sit there and say, but the Bible says. Also, I don't accept the Bible. So, because I know it's not infallible, I know it's flawed, I know it contradicts itself. My favorite contradiction being in Exodus, where it says God is jealous. And then in John, it says God is love. Okay, so God is love, and God also gets jealous. I can buy that. Except 1 Corinthians 13 says love is not jealous. That statement can't be true. So there's a contradiction. I'm going to put the Bible aside. We're talking about personal experiences, not another appeal to authority. What constitutes, why do you think that your interpretation of your experience is infallible? Also, every once in a while I get the argument for ignorance on these. Well, it's my experience. I can't interpret it any other way, so therefore it must be true. Just because you can interpret it some other way doesn't mean that I can't or somebody else. The idea that somehow some experience you had couldn't be interpreted multiple different ways, and that the only way it can be interpreted is the way you have interpreted it, is, well, quite frankly, hubris. And it's an argument from ignorance. Sorry. If I can look at your experience and say, yeah, but this could be true, this could be true, this could be true, you have to look at those, okay, because you're the one that has to prove that your claim is real. The problem is arguments from experience just can't be proven. They're just you saying your interpretation of your experience is infallible. You had X experience, so therefore, and you interpreted it a certain way, so therefore X is true. That's a horrible argument. It's a terrible argument. And every single argument from experience uses it. And that's why I dismiss it. I'm going to end those conversations about your personal experiences with this one. In fact, I'm going to keep this video handy in case anybody else uses it. I'm just going to slap this video down and call it good. I've really got bogged down in a couple of conversations here, and I'm just going to tell you this is my video that says this is why I don't accept personal experience stories as arguments for God. They're bad, they're lousy, and even when you steel ban it, it still is really, really awful. So there you have it. Now, I did want to address one other comment. This would be the comment of the day from Joe Sixpack. And I want to address his experience. He says, "Hi, Ed. I just found your channel. I am 53 years old. I grew up in the Church of God, baptized in the Southern Baptist Church, finally settled later on the Word of Faith Church. I consider now myself an agnostic. The first time my Word of Faith pastor prayed for me, I was in a prayer line. People ahead of me were falling out. As the pastor kept closer, I kept telling him I'm not going to fake anything. He was praying for us for financial blessings. When he got to me, he said, are you ready for this? You're never going to be the same again. He told me to hold both my hands out in front of me, palms up. He touched both my hands with his, and when he touched it, it felt like a jolt of electricity shocked me. I was sold after that. I was a catcher later after that. Whenever I was finally called to be prayed for, I always felt that jolt, either from him or from visiting evangelists. I started doubting that there was a God. I have been on this non-belief journey of mine for about 2 years now, but I have yet to understand what happened with the electrical jolt I always felt. I have Googled and searched YouTube of somebody who can explain this. It's the one thing left to me to clear my mind before I become an atheist. I know all religions are BS. I hate everything religions stand for, but this little thorn in my side bothers me. If you could help me understand this, if it's a common occurrence, I would greatly appreciate. Thanks for your help." Well, I want to address a couple of other issues before I get to your electric jolt. Number one, I would submit to you that you are an atheist. Whether or not we have sufficient knowledge to dismiss God claims completely is an epistemological question. Whether you're an agnostic or a Gnostic about something, whether you claim it can't be known or whatever, is a completely different spectrum than whether you believe there is a God or don't. I would submit to you that if you don't actively believe that there's any God, then you're an atheist. You're an agnostic atheist. Or in some cases, some people are Gnostic atheists. Gnostic atheists is the ones that will make the positive claim, there is no God. And they will make that positive claim and try to back it up. I am an agnostic atheist. I don't believe that there's sufficient evidence to believe in a God, so therefore I'm an atheist. But I also say there's a part of us as human beings that we're going to have to be a little bit humble and say that we can't really know for sure. But that's okay. I haven't been given sufficient evidence for God one way or another. There are, of course, Gnostic theists who strongly believe there's good evidence for God. There's also some people that have an active belief in God, but they kind of are just hedging their bets, and so they don't really know. But whether you know something, an epistemological question, is different from the question of whether or not you believe God. So I think you probably should clear that up. I'm going to submit to you that you probably are an atheist. Now, as to the electric jolt, the reason why you felt the jolt in the first place, and this is me being a suspicious son of a bitch, okay? And I hope you understand what I'm saying. After, how shall I say it, a long time in the Pentecostal church. I grew up in the Pentecostal church from the time I was 4 years old. an Assemblies of God church, and very much connected with Word of Faith later on in my life. But I saw a lot of things. And one of the things I remember as a Pentecostal preacher and in Bible college, went to a Pentecostal Bible college, Trinity Bible College in Ellendale, North Dakota, is one of the Assemblies of God schools. So I went to those. We had chapel, we had experiences. But one of the things I did experience was somebody trying to pass off a static electric shock as the power of God. I actually saw them do it. I don't know, a lot of these preachers not only scuff their feet, but they also have this tendency to do what I call an illusionist trick. I used to have a book of old illusionist magic tricks, the kind of things that you would see magicians like Penn and Teller perform, where they're doing sleight of hand and they're doing other things. One of the tricks that I remember reading about in that book was how to give people an electric shock. I'm not saying for sure that your preachers were dishonest, but as I recall, it doesn't take much to develop a really powerful, static electric shock on yourself that the moment you touch somebody else, you're going to give it to them. And then why would you continue to feel it? Because it was such a powerful original experience that the next time you find yourself into a similar environment, that experience is going to try to repeat itself. This is actually a pretty well-known psychological phenomenon that if you have some sort of traumatic, and I use the traumatic term in the broadest possible sense, and I'm certainly no expert in this, so I want to make that abundantly clear. But whenever you have a truly traumatic / significant experience like that, in the same situation, you tend to feel the physiological effects in the same way. For instance, I had a very bad experience when I was a child with heights. Every time I get into a similar situation where I'm up in a higher place, I feel the same physical sensations that I felt in that moment when I had that bad experience with heights. I have the same thing with claustrophobia. I had a very bad experience where somebody, threw me into a very tight and closed space and left me there for a couple hours. Whenever I'm in a tight, I feel the same. I feel the same physical closeness. And that is a very well-known psychological phenomenon. Now, based on my discussion before, I would tell to you, Joe Sixpack, because you've had that experience and it was a truly significant experience that you remember, every time you're in a very similar situation in the same environment, at the same church, dealing with the same evangelist or your pastor, you're going to feel that jolt because it was that significant. I'm going to tell you that it was probably emotional priming through the service. Probably the preaching did a lot of emotional priming. I was a Pentecostal for years. Trust me on that one. Happens all the time. And then some guy gave you an electric shock. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's possible for Pentecostal ministers, because I saw them do it, to generate static electricity in between every person that they pray for and then pass it off as the power of God. I've seen a couple of them do it. So it's not, that's my personal experience, so take it for what it's worth. But I'm also saying that this is an alternative explanation for what you experienced. And this is true of all physiological experiences where people claim that God touched them. One, there's a big gap of premises leading to the conclusion it was God, and I had this physiological experience. You don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to fill that gap that's evidence and expertise and doesn't deny reality. So that's why, you can take my personal experience for what it's worth, other than to say I did see some of this stuff. If I wanted to, using illusionist tricks, basic psychological manipulation, and hypnotism techniques, I could be one hell of a cult leader, okay, because I know how it works. And I know how to gin up a crowd, and my preaching at the end got very emotional, which people loved. And I know how to create the atmosphere in a church. If I really didn't have any scruples, I could be one hell of a cult leader. And I would be using normal illusionist tricks and stuff that is well known and well documented to get people to think that they're having experiences when they're really not having experiences at all. I want to thank you once again for stopping by. I appreciate all of you coming by and spending a little time with an old ex-preacher turned atheist who is reaching out of compassion and telling you, yeah, let's throw off the theism and be a little bit better. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. A little channel news. I'm getting very, very close to 200 subscribers. It's been phenomenal. I've had well over 60 subscribers in the last 28 days, and the growth of the channel right now is just phenomenal. A little bit of other channel news. There may not be a video on Friday. My son's coming in from New York, and I want to spend some time with him. So, I don't know if I'll have the time to record and do a video this weekend going into Friday. So the next time you see me, maybe Monday. And also, keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate all the likes, shares, and subscribes. I appreciate everything else. Also, along with all this success, I did have a commenter mention that they were very appreciative of me addressing their comment directly, and not a lot of YouTubers do that. Well, that's because I'm still fairly small. But with all these new subscribers and a lot more comments, I've come to realize that I may have to tone that down a bit. And it's not because I necessarily want to. It's because of practical necessity. I can't possibly address every comment. I can't possibly argue with every person who comes here and wants to make a claim. Which is why I'm heading more in the direction of saying this is why I don't believe this type of videos, and then being able to just post those when anybody has a question. Thank you once again for stopping by. You're also free to follow me on Facebook. You just follow me at the Rabyd Atheist on Facebook, and that's a growing community too. A lot of people have liked that page, and that's growing bigger, though not as big as the channel. But I appreciate everybody who comes there. And once again, thanks for coming by, and hopefully I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Rabyd, also known as the Rabyd Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.